So, no one told you life was going to be this way. Your job's a joke, you're broke, your love life's the OA. Welcome, everyone, to Pop Culture Maniacs podcast. As usual, there's me, Kieran, and joining me is our TV editor, Jean. And this podcast will, as you can guess from my opening introduction, will be focusing on the popular sitcom Friends. So, Jean, welcome.
Hello.
Hello there. Yeah. So, as I said, Friends. So, I think we're safe to say we both grew up during the show's high points. I think some younger people might not realise how popular it was back in the late mid-90s to early noughties.
Yeah. I mean, just in my own family, my sister's 5 years younger than me and missed out completely on Friends and discovered it on Netflix and was shocked at how great it was and how funny it was. And oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't tell me about this. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I remember it, but it was the biggest thing on TV. That Thursday night block of programming on NBC was literally everything. Every single person watched it. It was the biggest water cooler discussion ever. Between that and Seinfeld and ER, it was just a crazy, crazy run of programming.
Yeah, sort of like over here, I remember it being huge. Obviously, we made a really big deal when they had the one episode when they filmed a few scenes in London, and yeah, as I said, I think probably popularity wise, it would be comparable to something like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it was the most popular thing. I mean, that cast went from unknowns to the biggest stars in the world almost overnight.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get onto it because they were a collective. Obviously an ensemble, which they were all very, very good, all worked well with each other, and they also made sure that they were all evenly paid, weren't they? They were a collective. It was either all of them or none of them.
Yeah, and it was the first time in TV history that something like that has happened where nobody's ego got in the way and they all work together, and it's become a blueprint for other ensembles in film and television moving forward from there.
So obviously, I think as well with Friends, it's one of those shows which I think you can easily quote or recite so many of your favorite jokes. And again, going to one of my other ones, being like The Simpsons, you can do a lot of their quotes from their classic era.
Yeah, and a lot of the bits and the comments have really become ingrained in day-to-day conversation. Just the ones that I see the most often are anytime somebody's moving anything or talking about moving.
Oh yeah.
Everyone pulls out the pivot quote because that's just, it's so perfect.
Yeah.
And then so many Joey quotes, could I be wearing any more clothes, all of those kind of, could I be, and then just add in something else has become shorthand in the lexicon.
Yeah, or anything like, well, sort of like doing the jokey bit, like Ross's version of doing the finger. It's just if we been rewatching a few clips and like the lightning round from the quiz, from the quiz from the one with the embryos.
Yeah, I mean, that whole section of that show is just, I mean, that's probably my favorite Friends episode out of all of them, is that one, because that contest is just so iconic.
Yeah, and I'm actually currently writing on the best Friends episodes, and that's definitely high up there as one of the very best.
I mean, just I feel like people don't quite understand how difficult it is, not only to do a comedy where you have actors who are so perfectly attuned to their roles that they know exactly what they need to do, but to do a scene like that where you layer on the levels of insanity and just build to just a breaking point. I mean, it's not easy to do. And they did it so flawlessly. It's wholly impressive to me.
Yeah. And it is a show that has influenced so many others. I think certainly any other sitcom that sort of gets compared to Friends, and if it becomes super popular, super popular. You think of so like shows like How I Met Your Mother is obviously was compared a lot to Friends, because obviously it had that sort of friendship dynamic. So for something like as well like Coupling, which was basically considered British Friends, which ironically also got an American remake. Just so many of those, and The Big Bang Theory as well, wasn't it? That was usually compared to Friends as well.
Yeah, and in the immediate aftermath of Friends, there's so many attempts to try to capture that same magic in a bottle, but nobody. I mean, even with How I Met Your Mother or Big Bang Theory, you know, there's enough differences in them to push them away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the concept of having a core group of friends who basically it's just their friendship is the story is something that I don't think has ever been done as successfully, at least from a commercial standpoint, since then. And I'm not entirely sure anyone's ever really going to be able to duplicate that again.
And I think the way with sitcoms now is you certainly that sort of those sort of studios multi-camera formatted sitcoms aren't so popular to make anymore, because obviously people like the more cinematic look.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly, I mean, it's kind of the Modern Family syndrome where, you can, it's cheaper in one respect because you have more of a dramatic look to it, and it's frankly easier for the streaming services to churn those out and not have to deal with having studio audience and having multicam setups and all of that. So, you know, part of me really wants more multicams. I think it's such a unique experience to watch one of those, but it's gonna be hard to find
Yeah.
new ones. I mean, here in the States, the show Mom was one of the last remaining multicams, and show Last Man Standing, and those all ended this year. So they're really falling off the face of the earth.
Yeah. I'm trying to think actually with sort of because obviously same with it in the UK that we don't really do so many of the sort of studio set sitcoms, but then I think with Britain, there are some that were like a bit of a hybrid anyway. They had the studio bits, but they also filmed on location as well. Something like Only Fools and Horses. They also shot on location as well as shooting in the studio. Anyway, let's go move on to with Friends. Who was your favorite character?
I feel like the only correct answer to that is Phoebe. Um, I mean, particularly looking back at the show now, and how problematic so many of those characters ultimately turned out to be. Phoebe pretty much is, the only one who you can't really fault for much. And plus, in the years subsequent to Friends, Lisa Kudrow has far and away had the most complete and interesting career, and I've loved her in literally everything she's done since. So Phoebe to me is just so funny.
All right, I was going to go for Chandler. I think that he was quite a lot of people's favorite when they were back in the day. I think it's because he's sarcastic. I mean, he usually had some of the best one-liners as well.
Very true. Yeah, I mean, he could eviscerate usually Ross, with just a withering look, and he definitely was given the best comedy.
Yeah, and I think with uh, Friends, there was also it did do those dramatic moments as well, because obviously I think one of the biggest early storylines was with Ross and Rachel. Would they, won't they hook up? They got together, and then it was quite a dramatic. It was a pretty dramatic episode when they actually broke up.
Oh yeah, it was the biggest story of the series.
Yeah, yeah, and you can think of loads of others. Obviously, like Phoebe getting pregnant. Obviously, it was dealt like as a very emotional storyline when Chandler and Monica got engaged. Yeah,
Yeah, and I was particularly, and then they dealt with the infertility storyline, and I think they did that very well.
yeah, yeah. I would say I think there's a common criticism of Friends generally, though, is I think the characters as they progressed, they did sort of they did devolve and they became more of their base attributes. I think Joey was the one that got really affected the most because obviously when he first started, he was probably not as well read as the rest of the cast, or, but he was at least a functioning human being. By the end, you're thinking, how is this man able to look after himself?
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And, the more the show progressed, it just felt less genuine, and the characters, they almost felt mean. Like it got to the point where, I would tell people, like, I understand why they don't have any other friends now, because look at them. They're not particularly engaging people you'd want to be around. And I don't know if it was a function of the show running for so long that they ran out of ideas on how to continue to evolve the characters, or if it was more of a laziness of, these are the key attributes people seem to respond to. Like, Joey's stupid. Well, let's just turn that up to 12 and see what happens. And Chandler's sarcastic. Let's turn that up to 12. And so instead of evolving and changing and growing, which they had done for the initial couple seasons, by the end, it just was like, I don't want to be around these people.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was like seeing some of the online comments is Ross is seen as the worst of them. He got it with this sort of character devolution, because he's seemingly getting more stupid, sort of getting a bit more well, having more issues with the ladies, shall we say.
And he was vindictive too, like, not like the moment for me with Ross where I was kind of like, oh geez, he's toxic and not a good guy, even back when it originally aired, was when, he lied about getting the annulment. Like,
Yeah,
really? That's not cool.
yeah, yeah. I see. Yeah, I can see exactly where you're going with that, because it was because it was quite fun as well when that storyline started off, because because obviously the joke is obviously people get married, get drunk, go to Vegas, get married without even realizing it, and but yeah, it is quite a scummy thing he did.
Yeah, I mean, the initial storyline was hilarious. I loved it. It was perfect. It made sense for those characters to do something that ridiculous when they were drunk. Like, I fully was on board with it. And then, the correct way to do it is to wrap it up and move on from there. And if you ultimately want them to be the couple that gets together at the end, really, Rachel really want to get together with a guy who was lying about that? And then, like, all this other stuff. Like, he just didn't seem like a good guy anymore after that.
No, no. I think that was a way that with Friends as well, because you're saying like as the couple they want, which was going to be the couple that would get together. Because I feel in a way it looked for a while that they were going to be pairing all of them up, because obviously Ross and Rachel, Monica and Chandler. It did look like uh, felt for a while like Joey and Phoebe were very compatible. But I think looking back at it, it's probably wise that they didn't actually get them to be together.
Yeah, I think one of the smartest things he did was introduce Paul Rudd's character of Mike, and give Phoebe an outside person to bounce off of and to validate her. And I mean, I understand a lot of not putting them together was so that Joey could have a spin-off by the end, but it allowed Phoebe a chance, because for all Phoebe's fun and kookiness, she never 100% fit in with the rest of the group. It just always kind of felt like she was a little bit too different, and it gave her an outside it gave her an outside focus that also could normalize her a bit.
Yeah, I can see what you mean, because I think that even the show addressed it, because she was always the sort of the one that she didn't she didn't live as close to the rest of them. There wasn't sort of like that sort of connection, because it's all like obviously Monica and Rachel were friends at school. Monica and Ross are related. Ross and Chandler were 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 friends from college, and Joey obviously lives with Chandler, so they're all connected in some way.
Yeah, and she was kind of the odd man out. And even though, she worked with the group and everything was great and it was a good ensemble, it was nice to kind of give her that little outside focus.
Yeah, I think it's watch it like the honest trailer for Friends, like they commenting on her really dark backstory, and like let's just call her the kooky one, because obviously she's always saying her mum killed herself. She was a homeless when she was about 14. She had various stepdads. Obviously, her mum's life lesson was put out doesn't get you love, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and then her twin sister who was on Mad About You,
Yeah,
which was another great TV show. And then like just tying that in was interesting. I didn't expect them to go and be like, yeah, they live in the same shared universe. And, like that's just such a deep cut there.
yeah, and obviously because those are like they had the cameo from two of the characters from Mad About You as well, didn't they?
Yeah, and you couldn't pick two different shows.
Yeah.
And that like they do not have the same kind of aesthetic and the same kind of feel at all.
I think we have to go touch on the subject, like how modern perceptions of the show have become, because I'm sure we've both seen lots of sort of articles like things that wouldn't be allowed today, why Friends is problematic or whatever, and um, so yeah, I think we would have to address this subject, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we should. I mean, I fully agree that it's very problematic in a number of key ways. Um, and I think taking the time to acknowledge that and make it clear that there are problems with it. Those problems also are a reflection of the time in which it was created. It doesn't make it right, but it does lend a coloring to how things were done and why mistakes and troubling things got in. Um, and I think the one criticism that really should have been addressed better at the time, because it was a criticism laid out against the show at the time, and that was never fully realized, was the lack of diversity within the cast, within their friend groups, within even the background actors on the shows. The fact that they didn't have a single Black character on the show until someone pointed it out late in the run, and Aisha Tyler was brought in just to kind of meet a quota in a way. That's the one that I think is most glaring, and one that they really should have taken the time to look into while they were making it, because there really was no excuse in the mid 90s to not have a more diverse, not necessarily core group of friends, but a more diverse backgrounds surrounding the characters.
Yeah, I think I agree with that one. That certainly with Friends, that it, yeah, it was basically the whitest version of New York you'd ever see.
Yeah, and there's no reason why they couldn't have had, if not a more diverse core group of friends, then to at least have additional characters that moved in and out who are more diverse.
Yeah. The other area of the show's been getting lots of flack on with his with its uh, gay jokes, and particularly I think it's Catherine Turner as Chandler's dad.
Yeah, that one's really really rough to watch now. Particularly Chandler's gay panic and all of that surrounding it. And I will say, it wasn't unique to the period in which it aired.
Yeah,
Which is another, there's a number of shows that were in the same vein, telling those same jokes at the time, which isn't an excuse. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it helps explain that it wasn't just an anomaly on Friends.
yeah. I was going to say, I think you think of things like certainly Friends, or Simpsons, even though those sort of jokes. Yeah, and Futurama had like I remember one of their jokes was like, everything of human civilization is made to attract the opposite sex, or in some cases the same sex, and like going drama and things uh yeah, as I said, and I think obviously like society has moved on from there, but from that viewpoint.
Yeah, and particularly with the gay jokes and gay panic, we have to recall that at that time, you know, there weren't really gay characters on television. There certainly weren't trans characters on television. You know, Ellen wouldn't come out until, you know, a couple years into Friends run, and then all that blew up. So it wasn't exactly the most hospitable time for LGBTQ characters on TV at all. So that's another point to keep in mind when you look back and watch those episodes of Friends.
Yeah. Well, I was going to add though, with like Friends though, at the same time they had the Carol and Susan's relationship, and wasn't it? It was meant to be very groundbreaking that they had their, well, the same wedding, whether it was obviously at the time, whether it's considered a legal wedding, but you know, they essentially got married. Which
yeah, they let them get married, but the network wouldn't let them kiss on TV, which was, you know, a clear symbol of exactly what it was like to try and tell a queer storyline of any kind back in the mid 90s on television. But yeah, I mean, they handled that shockingly well.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was, you know, looking back, it's still pretty impressive how well they dealt with that.
And I think with when it comes to when they did have some gay characters, not many of them were like the sort of were the big were like the stereotypes you could think which popular culture at the time would have made out gay people to be. Sort of like Carol and Susan were made out to be quite were just made out to be very regular. They didn't fit into any major stereotypes. I think like there are other characters I know this is oddly mixing in like the gay panic, like people thinking Chandler's gay, and like he actually asks like a gay guy if he thought he had gay, and going no. But then again, this was like this gay character was portrayed as like just a regular office person.
Yeah, and you know, that's the looking back, you know, Chandler's gay panic, it was all on Chandler. It was never on the people around him, and the gay characters on the show weren't treated as, you know, stereotypes. And you know, it would be a couple years, it was like probably midway through the run of Friends when Will and Grace showed up and was paired up on the same night with it, at least here in the States. And you know, you got more stereotypical things on Will and Grace when it came to their gay characters than you really did on Friends, which was interesting.
Yeah. Admittedly, I was never really a big fan of Will and Grace when it was on.
Yeah, looking back, that one also is pretty problematic, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Should we move on to say what any of the projects that the actors from Friends moved on to?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, because obviously you already mentioned that Lisa Kudrow did very well. Her post Friends career.
Yeah, I mean, she's done a lot of producing, which is, you know, the really smart thing to do, particularly for a woman in Hollywood, is definitely get producing, because who knows how long you'll be considered allowed to work. But her big TV show, which wasn't really big, it flopped initially, was a show called The Comeback, which aired on HBO. And it had one season, and then, you know, almost a decade later they did a second season, and it's one of the most funny, smart, scathing, biting critiques of a certain type of actor in Hollywood. It's a very different character than Phoebe, and I highly recommend it to people who are looking for a different, you know, kind of comedy show to watch. It's only 20 episodes total, so it's pretty quick, but it's just such a well done show.
Yeah. I've never seen it, so I can't fairly judge. I think for me, I normally sort of seen Lisa Kudrow post Friends. She always got like small roles in comedy films. So something like Easy A, she was, you know, the mum of Emma Stone's character, college dean, and the Neighbours films. So she, obviously, just having a quick look through her credits, obviously. She had a little run on BoJack Horseman as one of BoJack's girlfriends, and probably one of the few that went in a relationship fairly unscathed afterwards.
Yeah, and it was one of the better arcs for BoJack when she was there.
Yeah. So yeah, she's done pretty well. I think Jennifer Aniston's the one. I think it was the one, but I think a lot of people thought she would do very well post Friends, and she's very keen on being a movie star.
Yeah, Jennifer Aniston kind of fell into kind of a typical Hollywood situation, um, where she was, considered so gorgeous, so beautiful, and that tended to overshadow the type of things she was offered, which was really unfortunate.
Because again, as I said, she's done probably the best out of them movie wise, because she's obviously, I think she can think of quite a few big ones she's done. Like just again looking up her credits right now, Marley and Me, where she's sort of Marley and Me, We Are the Millers, sort of quite comedy films. I think it's well because most recently she's got the morning show on Apple, hasn't she?
Yeah, so the morning show, she's managed to come back and be more relevant with that. Um, and it's really great. I'm thrilled that she's had this comeback. But the thing that worries me a bit is that to do it, she had to package herself with Reese Witherspoon and Steve Carell, and get those other names involved, which back in the day would not have been an issue. But I'm glad she's getting to work again. I'm glad she's getting to stretch her ability, and I'm really excited to see if she's going to get more opportunities to expand her work.
As you said, she had to sort of back in the day. She was considered the attractive one out of the late. Well, not that Lisa Kudrow or Courtney Cox were unattractive, but she was the one that I think was the general sex symbol out of the trio of ladies. And then she still looks really good for her, because she's 52 now.
Yeah, I can't believe they're that old. Like, to me, they're kind of like frozen in amber back in the time when they're on the show.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, when you saw the trailer for them for when they for the reunion, you do notice, like, God, some of them have really aged though.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends about it, and she was all, yeah, they all look great. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know what happened to Matt LeBlanc. Like, he looks so not the same. Like, it seemed like he aged overnight into like a middle-aged guy.
Yes, he has. Yeah, and I was because should we, move on to Matt LeBlanc quick, because like watching him, like saw some of his episodes, Man with a Plan, like again, because he went because playing suburban dad in that show.
Yeah, Matt LeBlanc is interesting. Like, I don't think they ever really figured out what to do with him as an actor.
Yeah,
It's like, he got the spinoff with Joey right away. It didn't work because, the magic of Friends was all six of them together, not a single one of them. And then he just kind of got stuck in that role as, the doofus, the not smart hot one. And I think, he's significantly more talented than that, obviously. And I was kind of disappointed to see that he never really had that career again.
No, I think his biggest role post Friends was it was in the show episodes where he sort of like played a parody version of himself, or like the egotistical Hollywood actor.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he had that single, one hit, and and it had to be just a derivative of his character that he'd already played.
Yeah. And the other big role was when he presented Top Gear, which was a bit of a poison chalice, because he was taking over after the original three left.
Yeah, he was put up I mean, not really to fail, but he was put in a position where he couldn't win.
Yeah. Still, I think he was considered one of the better things, because when you're paired up with Chris Evans, and when I say Chris Evans, I mean British Chris Evans, anyone looks good by comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, he's not had such a good career. I remember like he did Lost in Space, the sci-fi film, and like they were trying to pitch him as like the next big action star, and obviously that didn't work.
Yeah, and I think he, more than anybody else on the show, really got cursed by audiences not buying him as somebody other than Joey.
Yeah, Joey, because if we move on to someone like David Schwimmer, because he's since Friends, he's sort of more he's moved into quite a lot of directing, hasn't he? He's done a lot of, it was even when he was on Friends, he was directing some episodes, but I think one of his projects I really liked was the film Trust, if you ever seen it.
I have not, but I will check it out.
Yeah, it's basic. It's a very good, if quite bleak watch, because it's about basically it's about a teenage girl who gets groomed online and like the impact on her family afterwards.
That sounds pretty heavy.
Yeah, so yeah, and you wouldn't have thought it would be from the guy shouting, "We were on a break." But he's again like done. Obviously, he's done things. Obviously, that's not exactly much. Oh, that's it. He's sort of fitted into quite a few dramatic roles, hasn't he? Sort of like he did the People versus O.J. Simpson, because he was wasn't he the lawyer? And
yeah, he was Robert Kardashian.
yeah, I'm guessing
Yeah,
that is it was that I'm guessing he's related to the very famous Kardashians.
yes, he is their late father.
I see.
He was the lead lawyer in OJ, or one of the lawyers in OJ's case, and then he passed away not long after.
Yeah, I see.
And David Schwimmer is interesting too because he did a lot of theater before moving to LA. He has a theater company here in Chicago that he continues to work with, and I think, and it's just conjecture, but I think out of the whole cast, he was probably the one who wanted to distance himself the most from Ross, from Friends, from that era of comedy and that idea that he's just that guy. And I think he did that by not really performing much anymore after Friends.
Yeah. I've seen like quite lot of his credits. He seems to have done quite a few. He's done quite a few more dramatic roles, because even during Friends, I remembered him. He was in Band of Brothers because he was the initial drill sergeant or training officer, wasn't he? And who the main characters hated.
Yeah. And I think, his background is certainly more dramatic.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted to not be typecast if he could help it.
Yeah. And there was obviously, remember there was a guy who in UK, someone was caught shoplifting, and like the guy looked a lot like David Schwimmer. David Schwimmer even did a parody of it, didn't he?
Yeah, he found it pretty funny and had a good enough sense of humor to dive in.
Yeah, and I think like the police are saying like, yes, we've eliminated David Schwimmer from our inquiries. Yeah, it's quite. Yeah, that's quite fun. Shall we say someone like Courtney Cox was probably the most successful pre Friends, because she did Ace Ventura, didn't she, before she was in it?
Yeah, she had that, and she had the Bruce Springsteen music video that was really popular.
Yeah, and just in like it was around the same time she was in the Scream films as well.
Yeah, I think during Friends, she had the strongest career out of everybody because of the Scream films. I think they really allowed her to branch out from Monica in a way that the other actors weren't really allowed to during time on the show.
Because especially the first Scream films, because she was like the ultimate bitch, wasn't she?
Oh yeah, she was nasty, but it worked. She was really good in that.
Yeah. Though obviously having again looking up through her post Friends credits, probably the one thing I remember was Dirt and Cougar Town. So that's two things, because those were meant to be our big shows, weren't they? Post Friends.
Yeah, and Cougar Town was always a critical darling and never really had the ratings to back it up, which is unfortunate. Because I mean, the name of the show was really the problem, and everyone agreed with that, but it was too late to change it. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because she had a lot of talent. I think she might have been the most. I mean, between her and Lisa Kudrow, I think they had the most overall like actual talent and range. And it disappoints me that she never really got to experience the same kind of success in a more deep and interesting role than Monica.
Yeah. And I think finally that leaves us with Matt LeBlanc, with not Matt LeBlanc, Matthew Perry, with what his acting career during and post Friends was like. So I remember that he had he did a few episodes of The West Wing that didn't he? He was like a Republican and working at the White House for.
Yeah, he was a Republican attorney for the White House.
Yeah, and then he moved on, and basically he led to the downfall of the vice president.
Yeah, I mean, the vice president really led to his own downfall, but yeah.
Yeah, and he was also what's it? I was going to say. And obviously got in with Aaron Sorkin, because he did his big show post Friends was Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which I think it was a shame that it didn't last for a bit longer. But I think even Aaron Sorkin admitted there were issues. I think it's not exactly as accessible TV show, because it's focusing on Hollywood writers, which so writers writing about writers isn't very.
Yeah, I mean, I could do an entire hour just on the problems with Studio 60. But the problem with that, I mean, there was the focus was weird. It was set in like an SNL type show, and so you have to also write SNL quality sketches, like good SNL, not bad SNL.
Yeah.
And the sketches weren't funny. There was way too much going on. There was too many really weird, dark storylines threaded throughout it. I mean, if you look at the cast, it was ridiculously good cast, most of whom have gone on to big, better things. Particularly Sarah Paulson, who was in it as kind of like the female star of the show.
Yeah.
Now she's Sarah Paulson. But it was a show that was just starting to find its way right at the end of its first season when it got canceled. It finally figured out what it needed to do. And then, it would have been a really interesting ride for Matthew Perry to keep going on that one.
Yeah. I think just again looking at some of his credits. So obviously, I think during Friends, his big film was The Whole 9 Yards, which he did with Bruce Willis, and that led to Bruce Willis having his short run on Friends, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was actually really funny.
Yeah. Even if he had this go back into Ross with his problematic storyline, him going out with one of his students.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, Ross.
Yeah. We normally would say never change, but I think in that case, please do change.
Why was anyone friends with him after that? Why was anyone friends with him? I don't understand it.
It's like, I think it's like with that storyline, it's how they try to justify it as well. If it was she fancied him, but he come on, you should know better. You should know. Don't shag your students.
Exactly, 100%.
Anyway, let's get back to Matthew Perry, because I think otherwise you get his career. The only other big film he did was 17 again, which was basically a vehicle for Zac Efron, wasn't it? Because he played the older version of Zac Efron's character.
Didn't he do a movie with Salma Hayek called Fools Rush In? I feel like he did.
Oh, that was in 97.
Yeah, that's the only Matthew Perry film I even remember existing.
Yeah, and his again post Studio 60. The only other thing he's really done of note was what was it? The Odd Couple, but I don't think I've even seen that one.
Oh yeah, that was not good.
Okay, so not worth watching.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all of them. And should we? I think we have to touch on the Friends reunion. That's because we're recording this pre the reunion show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I was very disappointed when they showed it and everything. Oh, it's not an episode, it's just them talking about it. So it's gonna it's all I think for me it sort of immediately dropped my interest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interested. I'm interested in some of the discussion about what the experience was like for them. I know, and I hope they talk about some of, the harder stuff that they went through. I don't want to like wallow in it, but Matthew Perry had a serious addiction problem during the heyday of Friends, and that really impacted a lot of the show in a way. And yeah, I kind of they talk about how being on a show like Friends changed the trajectory of their lives, but also changed their ability to distance themselves from it. I mean, the fact that they're doing a reunion show of Friends pretty much sums up the fact that they can't get away from it. It's who they are. They're always going to be linked together. How does that impact not just their career but their lives? I doubt they'll get into all of that because it's pretty deep, and I think HBO Max really just wants them to promote the show so that people buy subscriptions and watch it.
Yes, we paid all this money to get Friends back.
Yeah, exactly. And so many younger people from Gen Z do watch it. Like, it's still incredibly popular. It was always one of the most popular things on Netflix, and it wasn't Gen X and older millennials watching it again. It was younger generations picking up and watching it, which is interesting. I never thought Friends was going to be a show that could transcend generations because it was so specifically about a time and place and a type of life. And I hope they get into a bit of that, which is how is this such a universal story about 6 white people magically living in ridiculously expensive apartments that they can still pay for and never go to work?
Yeah, I think actually that's quite fun. Like I'm thinking that just maybe think of a video once I watched like someone calculate like how much would Chandler be worth considering owning a flat in downtown, an apartment in downtown New York, or at least renting one, getting obviously pretty much also supporting Joey at the same time, like saying like writing off like all the debt that Joey built up over the years and all that. Anything, and obviously his family were obviously very wealthy because he went as well, so he obviously inherited a lot of or got support from his parents as well.
Yeah, but like a single role on Days of Our Lives for Joey, like, certainly didn't give him the funds that he could pay Chandler back for all of that, which is it's crazy to me. But it's a sitcom, so none of that really matters.
Well, I think it's sort of like with American sitcoms, you can get away with being a slightly more out there, slightly more zany. I think it's just trying to get that right balance because like the tradition of say British sitcoms is we tend to talk more and sort of be a lot more grounded, but we also tend to be people that aren't so.
Yeah, a lot of American comedy tends to be centered around aspirational stuff where you want what they have, and the fact that they have imperfect lives makes them more relatable and also funnier because you can laugh at the people who have more than you, but still want to be them. At least modern comedy. I mean, older comedies in the US were very different, but the 90s and early aughts, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah. And just before we wrap up, I think we should just say have you got any particular favorite episodes or like on the top of your head?
I think my favorite's probably the one with the embryo, because of the contest. Like, to this day, just the idea that nobody knows what Chandler does is
Yeah.
just so like so relatable in a way that is shocking to me, because we all have friends who do something and we're not quite sure what exactly it is they do for a living, but it involves something. And just the fact that these people have been friends for literally years, almost their entire lives, and they still can't tell you what Chandler does for a living.
Yeah. So that would definitely be high up for me as well, because of I also, so with that episode, you had that emotional call with Phoebe, because obviously she was trying to be a surrogate for her brother and sister-in-law, and it was essentially their only shot of having a child. Now, there's like that very sort of the big heartwarming moment when she announces that she's pregnant, whilst they're all Chandler and Joey are moving into the apartment.
Yeah, and it was such an interestingly fun, like that whole storyline with Phoebe being pregnant. Obviously, it was to cover up Lisa Kudrow's real life pregnancy, but when she has the triplets and just that scene where she's having to say goodbye to them. Not really goodbye though, because she's going to be in their life, but it just was so heartbreaking. And that whole arc was just beautiful. And it really humanized Phoebe in a way that the show hadn't done to that point.
Yeah. Since you covered one that I was going to mention, so I'll go for another episode, and the one with the cop, the one which one we also mentioned, the pivot moment. But you also had the fun because you had the story. You had the other storylines being Phoebe finding a cock badge and starting to abuse it, and Joey thinking that fearing he had feelings for Monica.
Yeah, that one was also really funny.
Yeah. So there are quite a lot of good episodes. I would think, as we touched on, I think as the show did go on, it did decline a bit. I don't think that when I'm looking back at some of the episodes, I'm not seeing as many classics from series 9 or 10, unfortunately.
Yeah, the show at that point was kind of running on fumes, but also just rehashing things they'd already done before. We all kind of knew where it was headed. They'd set up like, all right, we have 2 more years left. We just have to get to the end point. And kind of similar to the way How I Met Your Mother did, which was, we know the end is coming. Let's just push towards it.
At least had a more satisfying conclusion than How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, it's not that hard to end a sitcom, guys. Why'd you have to screw it up, How I Met Your Mother?
So on that point, I think that seems like a good time to wrap. So listeners, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed our discussions, our ramblings, my stuttering. Please like us, comment, subscribe, all that stuff for our almighty god of the algorithm. Follow, look on us up, look on popculturemaniacs.com, and usual things: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Thank you very much. Goodbye.